the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like. Come and join us in the chat. National championship in the books behind us. Today, we are already going to start looking at the outlook for 2023. It is way too early season, and dadgummit, you know we're going to come and contribute to the discourse because we got thoughts too. So we're going to run down what it's looking like, some of the way too early top 25s, how we would stack them up. Also, there has been a lot of ongoing conversation around the calendar for college football, the early signing period, maybe moving it. A lot of talk about the way December has been. Greg Sankey told us in Los Angeles that all the coaches say it's crushing them. Bud, for those of you watching live at youtube.com/cover3, you see he is still at the coaches convention. We'll get some insight there. Plus headlines like Lincoln Riley, a vote of confidence for his defensive coordinator. Okay. Spencer Rattler coming back to South Carolina, and a lot of buzz on the recruiting side of things. Maybe more on that later, but want to begin with a very simple question. Is it so simple that even with, we're losing two-time everything Jag plus Stetson Bennett. We're saying goodbye to a couple offensive linemen. We're obviously saying goodbye to Jalen Carter. Given what is coming back, something that we discussed in the reaction pod on Monday night, does every way too early top 25 list need to start with Georgia?
No, Georgia's probably going to be 7-5 or 6-6 next year.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's go.
Who was out here with these? Who fueled the no one was doubting, no one believed in us narrative?
Kirby's making deep fakes. Like, he's got the video team. That's what those analysts are. They're making deep fakes of every single analyst on ESPN, CBS Sports HQ. Got us all out here saying, oh, Georgia's probably not even going to get to a bowl game next year. It's all Kirby doing impressions.
Tom's right. So Kirby was on one of those Saban staffs that made the fake articles before that one title game. Like Bama did this before.
Seriously?
And Kirby was on that.
Yes.
Yeah, seriously.
Did y'all know this story?
Yeah.
Yes.
They definitely did.
Oh, wow.
They will use anything.
That's an old trick. Yeah.
Yeah. I want somebody to create some Kirby video with him in a mustache and glasses and him just trashing the team, saying, I think they'll be 7-5. They absolutely would do something like that. And maybe, I know in years past, I've been not accused. Some people told me that my tweets have been used to fuel Bama, in years past. And I guarantee you they come up with a list of tweets. And I don't think players know who half the analysts are, if they're real, fake, or not. All you got to do is find some tweet. And now it's easier than ever with a blue check mark. I know it wasn't then, but they'll create a tweet and say, man, these dogs are going to be awful next year, replacing 5, defensive first rounders. They're probably going to be 7-5. Bam, throw it up there. They don't care who the tweet is from. I also think there's a chance, man, maybe he just went to some Russian bot army and created them just to troll every single player throughout the season. You guys suck. You guys are 7-5.
I mean, if he did it, he should. I mean, as nervous as Kirby Smart sounds right now about this team getting too high on his horse and the stuff he was saying, he was like, I think that winning it this year after losing all those guys is actually easier than winning it next year, because all these guys are going to be back and not have that same hunger and fire that they had before. What did he call it? The entitlement disease. He better fire up that bot army to be able to just pepper these guys with tweets all through the offseason that they can't go and do it and that they're just not good enough. Because, I mean, on my top I haven't nailed out every single position right now. I've got it in tiers 1 through 4 to 5, 10, 11, 14, 15, 17, 18, 24, and the like. But Georgia's my number one.
Georgia is a tier unto itself, right?
Yes.
There is
even
nobody
going
else
into next season.
Yes. Because look, Stetson Bennett was a really good college player, but a lot of quarterbacks would have still won the national title for Georgia. Okay. There's how many guys in our top 25 we're about to drop here do you think Georgia also would have won the title with? Because I think it's probably 10 or 12. Okay. That is the reason I think one of the reasons it's so hard to go back to back to back is because eventually you lose that quarterback who's a first round pick, Stetson is a really good college player, but he's not irreplaceable talent-wise. and it's Georgia. This very well could be the best Georgia team coming up with the level they recruited. They had 4 freshmen on the field for the last drive against Ohio State. Like they relied on a lot of young guys. They're going to fix their receiver problem, if you want to call it a problem. They just went to the portal to get the leading receiver in the SEC. They just took from Missouri, and they also got Ra Thomas from Mississippi State. I think Carson Beck will be more than capable for them. And if they didn't think he was, they'd go out and get a portal quarterback. They also have some other options behind him. I think they're a tier unto themselves until proven otherwise.
That's where I think they've taken over the mantle from Bama, because we used to talk about them that way. And Bama has to kind of show us that they're back in there. They might say, hey, we're there too. The great part about this, we're about to find out what life after Stetson Bennett is like, right? Because I did see some people pushing back. We did the how many teams would trade for Stetson Bennett. I agree with everything you're saying, Bud. They will have a more talented quarterback. Jake Fromm was like, he was just a guy too, and he had 3 picks against South Carolina. And even if it's a first-year starter, there's some experience factor. Like, do you have a game where you just lay an egg that could cost your team? I think that's there. The reason I think they should be on a tier all by themselves, how about the schedule? I mean, I sent out a thing earlier this year. It was like Georgia will have the easiest road to back-to-back championships of anybody. And I might follow it up, retweet it, and say the easiest road to a three-peat, especially considering what's happening at Florida, what's happening at some of these others. Kentucky wasn't that great this year. Ole Miss, one of their crossover games, like who knows how good they really are after limping into the finish of the season. No Oklahoma, that game canceled, so their non-conference is a complete cakewalk. Like Tennessee and Knoxville, that's going to be their kind of one big game in the regular season again.
They're number one.
Oh.
They're going to be number one,
yeah,
and they will be number one next season. But going back to the replacing Stetson thing, here's an interesting question I have for you guys, because you brought up Jake Fromm, Danny. Jake Fromm went in the 5th round, pick 167 to the Buffalo Bills. Does Stetson Bennett get drafted before that or after that?
Before.
I think after.
I think
you think before?
Yeah.
I think that he's going to get into those interviews, and the teams are going to really like him. And I also think he's going to test better, like athletically, than most people understand, because we've talked about it. One of the reasons Georgia is where Georgia is right now is because of its development. It's not just getting the talent, it is developing it, both mentally and physically. Stetson Bennett has developed physically alongside every single other player on that roster. He's not the same kid he was coming out of high school. He's not the walk-on. You could talk about his size, but Bryce Young is no bigger than he is, and Bryce Young might be the first pick in the draft. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think that his ability, his mobility, his decision-making, his athleticism, his intangibles, I think somebody is going to fall in love with him.
So
I actually have a bet on this, on what he will run at the combine. At Under Armour, I was talking to some of our Georgia guys, and I won't name who, but he's like, all right, Stetson is going to run under a 4.6.
Yeah.
I was like,
come on, no chance at the combine.
On the combine,
maybe it is pro day. Zero chance at the combine.
So I have 4.61 or worse.
Can I get on that with you?
When you see him, like when he took off when he takes off in game, that dude is fast. He's faster than most of the other guys on the field.
Well, I know he can go. I mean, clearly, like he's not going to run a 4.9, but like
No.
he can really go. But 4.6 on the actual
4.6
combine
might be a bit much. Yeah.
Fast. Like that's
Mhm.
like these guys that move to receiver,
So I've got Stetson Bennett going earlier than Jake Fromm, and the reason is because of Todd Monken. I think that Todd Monken is going to prepare him for those interviews, because Georgia runs an NFL defense. And to use Kirby Smart's own words, is like, now when Stetson goes to the NFL, he's not going to be talking like, quote, he's got marbles in his mouth. Like he's going to come out there and he's going to have a full command of all these pro concepts. When you combine with his record as a starting quarterback, I can't say what he's going to run. I don't have the good eye for. I don't know why I don't have a good eye for athleticism, being such an elite athlete myself. But I do think that for what we've heard from Georgia's coaches and from people around the Georgia program, like he's going to be able to impress NFL coaches with his understanding of NFL concepts from running an NFL offense. I think he goes earlier than Jake Fromm.
So we clarify one thing on the Georgia, on how we're doing this, because Georgia's not a great example for this, because it's like whether you're doing power ratings or projections, Georgia's going to be number one, right? But like, how did you guys handle 2 through 25? Are you like, hey, this is how I think it'll finish?
No,
Or
I
these
don't
are
look
like
at
the best
schedule.
25 teams on a neutral field?
Closer to best 25 teams on a neutral field. I'm not trying to guess where you finish in terms of like your record or your schedule. A little bit more in
Oh,
the abstract.
I didn't power rate them like as far as how they're rating gambling wise. I just did where I think these teams will finish in the rankings next year, and I kind of mostly broke. Like I have them in order, but I've really got it in 5 tiers.
Yeah, same. So how many teams are in the top? You said Georgia's a tier unto itself.
Georgia is the first tier.
I've got Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan, and then I draw a line.
That's my second tier.
No USC in that tier?
No, definitely no
God,
USC
no.
in that tier. I've got 4 teams that I would like start to look at before I get to Caleb Williams, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Lincoln Riley, and the Pac-12 runner-up, and the Cotton Bowl runner-up USC Trojans.
I have
guess-
what are we calling the next tier? Like, if things go right, they can win the Natty. They're
So
like,
is
they
it,
could
there's
upset
no
Georgia
debate
if it
about
breaks
Alabama,
right.
Ohio State, Michigan, right? Like those are the next, like, but
Yeah.
doesn't
I
matter
have
if Jim
Penn State,
Harbaugh or
Penn State,
Sharon
LSU,
Moore.
Texas. Penn State, LSU, Texas are the other 3 that I think if everything breaks right, they could take them down.
I'm with you on Penn State and LSU. I'm still being mean about Texas. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm still being so mean about Texas.
Texas is in my 5th tier.
Some of these
Texas
things too. I mean, and you Bud alluded to it, like somebody said, how are we treating Michigan? Because this could change dramatically if Harbaugh takes the Broncos job. Like that to me is a massive difference. It also, like when I think about USC, the fact that he's bringing Alex Grinch back tells me that he's going to have more talent on the defensive side of the ball, just like he addressed the defensive side or the offensive side of this ball this past year. So that's like, you have to consider the competition, maybe not even the schedule, but the fact that they're probably going to have a good chance to win the Pac-12. I'm more bullish on USC. Maybe it's because I was so down on them this year and was surprised. I don't think they're going anywhere.
I've got USC closer to Florida State.
Yep.
Where
But
you're
not
looking.
so Bud, Florida State not in the tier with Penn State or LSU or Texas.
Well, if you like, I think Florida State has much more certainty than some of those teams, but I don't think they have the upside to win a national title. Like, none of Florida State's offensive linemen would start on Georgia, right? Like, the guy there until I was extremely excited, like Fabian Lovett would play at Georgia, but he wouldn't start. Verse would start. None of the guys in the secondary. Well, the corner for Virginia might. Like, there's just I think Florida State's extremely well coached on offense, and they have a lot of good college players. But like we talked about with TCU, they don't have a lot of dudes who project like first round. So I have Florida State. Where do I have them? I have them 8th. So they're like the top of that next tier. I think they're a very live team to make the playoff, but I don't know about the upside overall with the next level athletes.
Yeah, I guess like I could break down my tiers as Georgia, playoff favorites, and then the 3rd tier is teams that can get to a playoff. I don't think they're going to win a national title, but they could, get a playoff berth in the 4th team, or they could, get that. And then the 4th tier is teams I consider like conference contenders for the most part, also including Notre Dame. And then the 5th tier is just these are good teams and they'll probably be ranked.
So that one tier that gets to playoffs, that's like they could get beat 65-7.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you do with TCU?
They're in my 4th tier.
I've got them in the
And
11 to
20th.
14 bucket, outside of the top 10, but like have been so impressed with sort of what the new staff has done that I'm creating a high floor, even after losing Max Duggan, Quentin Johnston, Travius Hodges Tomlinson, like incredibly important players. I'm still going to give them a pretty high floor just based on what we saw this season.
Here's a fun little question for you guys. I've got him in the 4th tier. I've got him at 13. I don't know. I don't think they're going to finish at number 13 next year, just to be blunt. But TCU went from 5-7 to the playoff. What would you put the chances at TCU going from title game to 5-7?
Who's the non-con? They get Colorado, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
With
Oklahoma
SMU.
State is like a smoking crater. SMU lost Mordecai. I'm just trying to think of like how many guaranteed wins in my head, and then like how many coin flips.
I've
Right?
got Colorado, Nichols, and SMU in the non-con. And the Big
3
12
wins.
schedule
Project
doesn't
that like
release.
that's like 2.55. Okay,
Mhm.
round up to 3.
But I mean,
I'd be very shocked if they went 2-7 in Big Ten play.
Like, yeah, I'm asking it not in the context that I think that's what's going to happen. I just think that it's not a non-zero chance. And when you typically think of teams that reach the playoff, like, have we had any of them fall off that badly the next season and miss a bowl game? I feel like if this would be the team with the best chance. Maybe that Washington team a few years ago had a decent chance, but I feel like this one would be the quote unquote favorite to be the first.
But in the 5-7 season, there were close losses. Like there were,
but there were close wins this year.
And then in the 12-2 campaign from this year, there were 7 close wins. I think that imagining that we're going to go all the way back to 5-7 is highly, highly, highly unlikely.
Okay, well then, what would you put the odds that TCU doesn't finish next season ranked in the final CFP top 25?
Like 45%.
It's a high number, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody? Am I the low man on TCU?
I've got them between 11 and 14. I've got them sitting around with Utah, Oregon, and Tulane.
I've got them at 13, like I said, but they're in that tier where it's like this team could win its conference next year, but I think that's probably the ceiling.
Yeah. And like you got to be down on the Big 12, right?
I mean, it's going to depend on Texas, and Chip, you and I are very much in the anti-Texas boat right now, just on principle, but
because of like what Kansas State and TCU did.
Well, like the Big 12,
like Kansas beat Arkansas. Texas Tech blew out Ole Miss. I mean, I'm down on the Big 12.
Arkansas won that game.
Arkansas won.
Oh, sorry.
I understand that Arkansas is such a like heaping like tire fire right now that you just assume that they lost their bowl game, but they did end up winning after that collapse. It is the idea that the Big 12 conference has taken on this role where we all season love it more than all the other conferences because of how awesome it is. But then when you get into the postseason and all of these teams, like Oklahoma's close loss to Florida State was one of the most impressive Big 12 bowl performances that we had. When your close loss is like one of the best bowl performances, I think it's a fair take to be like the Big 12 did not meet expectations in the postseason across the board.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I mean,
for the first time in a while, because I know Jordan always chimes in. What about Tennessee? What about the Vols? We haven't said the Vols yet, and they could be just as good at quarterback, at least physically gifted wise. I think they'll get better defensively. It can't get much worse. Where do you have the Vols?
They are better at quarterback, physically gifted.
Yeah, these guys got a cannon.
It's mentally and accuracy. Like there's no Georgia has the most Tennessee has the most physically gifted quarterback in the SEC in terms of like the ability to flick the ball 75 yards. I mean, talk to any of the coaches, even on Clemson, who are watching this kid throw the ball in warmups for the Orange Bowl. I mean, he's chucking it like 75 yards in the air.
Listen,
Joe Milton is a freak of freaks.
Joe Milton did not spend all of Christmas break trying to teach their parents and uncles how to pronounce Iamaleava for him not to start, okay? Tennessee fans have been working so hard to make sure they get this pronunciation down. The man's going to start by the end of the season. He's too talented. I've got Tennessee in the 18-24. They are without a doubt deserving of a top 25 spot, but I'm not slotting them ahead of some of the teams in like the top 15 because of the importance of the players that are going to be gone from last year's roster.
Well, we are on the subject. Well, we are on the subject of Tennessee and its super arm quarterback, Joe Milton and Nico Iamaleava. Did I say it right?
Yeah, Iamaleava. Yeah.
There we go. Cool. Can I just go on a side rant about how annoyed I was? They released a video and it was cool. I get it. Tennessee's going to the Orange Bowl. So they showed Joe Milton throwing an orange 100 yards, right? And it's cool. Whatever. It goes viral. The football throwing 75 yards is far more impressive than throwing an orange 100 yards. There are plenty of outfielders who could throw a baseball 100 yards. It's not that big of a deal. But anyway, yeah. Just sorry. When I saw that, everybody was like,
"Throwing an orange 100 yards."
Yeah, but
it's
that's
not. It's
really
only 300
not that
feet.
Impressive, yeah.
Right.
It's
You
like,
could throw from the catchers,
yeah,
but you could throw
yeah.
I've played with guys. You could throw it over 400 feet. You know.
Yeah, I could throw 300
Baseball.
feet when I was in high school. I could throw a baseball 300 feet. So it was not like I'm like, if I can do that, it's really not that impressive to me. But everybody thought it was super cool.
Can we peel back? Can we peel back some of the layers on the good LSU feelings? Because that's your long shot title pick. Like if you want to go find like an 18-1 or a 19-1, 20-1 national championship ticket for next season and snap it up, I think LSU might be as one of the better options that you might have there. What are it's not the bowl game performance specifically. What is it about LSU that is encouraging or reason why we seem to have them all in the top 10 and why they might be popular dark horse picks next year?
So
They're
I think
talented. You go.
The youth along the line of scrimmage growing up, right? Like they started 2 true freshman tackles this year. Those guys are probably both NFL guys and are going to be even better in their second year. Brian Kelly was a first-year coach. Now he knows his roster a lot better. He's a proven winner. 2 options at quarterback. Like I think Nussmeier might be just as good or better than Daniels. Malik Neighbors really came on second half of the season. Taylor, the tight end. They get Mason Smith back. Remember, like that's probably the best player on their whole team. And he got hurt on the first drive of the FSU game. That's like a first round Jalen Carter type ability kid. I mean, he was number 1 recruit in the country on some services. Basically, everybody had him at least top 5 or top 10. Secondary, they're doing a really nice job in the transfer portal as well. And the overall athleticism on that team is, again, like we're talking. I might pick Florida State to beat them in week 1. But if we're talking ceilings, like if everything goes right, do they have the dudes that don't look out of place when they warm up on the same field against a Georgia? LSU does fit in that category to where you can make the case if everything breaks right. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to say it boils down to having a lot of talent and a good coach and a good veteran quarterback. I think that if you look at, I mean, I think they exceeded expectations by quite a bit this year. And I think that's just a testament to Brian Kelly. We were all spending so much time in the offseason making fun of his accent that we forgot he's kind of pretty good at the whole being a football coach thing.
And still lost A&M.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like does everybody have A&M ranked?
No.
I
do.
Oh, without
the guys are
back end.
The guys are losing to the portal are all the guys that I think in our heads were like, oh, that guy could be a problem. That guy could be a problem. Like not the dudes. It was like, okay, like, kid that is mature, doesn't cause problems at events, things like that. Like they're holding on to the guys that I think are the dudes who profile as like guys who will handle their business, make it to the NFL. Some of the dudes that they're losing are like guys that have to be ranked really highly as recruits because you look like an idiot if you don't make the kid who's 6'6", 280 and runs 4.8 a 5-star, right? But it's not surprising based on the other non-physical factors that some of these guys are leaving. But like I like the guys that they're keeping quite a bit.
See, my 2020.
I mean, I have them in the back end too. I mean, we know the roster is going to be talented. We've all thought, man, if they got a fresh set of eyes in the offense, they got it. Like DJ Durkin's one of the great, better defensive coordinators. Like if it goes right and they catch some momentum, that's why I think they could be this year's TCU.
See, my 2023 offseason New Year's resolution is I'm staying away from the hype beast programs. I'm not going to fall for it again. Like Texas, I've got them in my 5th tier. Texas A&M I could have put in my 5th tier. I guess Miami I could put in my 5th tier if I really wanted to. But I'm just staying the hell away from them. Not until they actually prove it am I going to start getting behind them again.
Do you know what's really nasty is that I considered putting Iowa in ahead of Texas A&M.
Iowa is in mine ahead of Texas A&M.
I mean, like
I have Iowa like 26.
Yeah, like I've got a level of consistency in all these other areas, and I am adding a significant upgrade at the quarterback position in Cade McNamara, and that's where some balance. Like to answer your early question, Bud, about the how do you approach this? Is this true power rating? Is this how you think it's going to finish? Is this like schedule into consideration? I do need some certainty. Like I can't say, all right, like I know that this is going to be a delicious at the end of this. And at least with Iowa, I feel like I've got those base ingredients that are going to make sure that it's going to be good. And if they do get some good play out of Cade McNamara, that'll go over the top. Like Quinshon Judkins being at Ole Miss, I'm like, well, they're probably still going to be really good at running the football. Like I'm not going to put Ole Miss higher than 19, but I've got them in that sort of back end of the top 25 at this point.
I have them 24.
Like UTSA, you got to give Frank Harris some love. Throw a team that's won all of these games over the last couple of years. Those to me are teams that I am going to put on my way too early top 25 ahead of Texas A&M, just because there's at least some little bit of certainty, while acknowledging for the purposes of discussion, yeah, if it all works out, Texas A&M can lose spectacularly in the college football playoff semifinal.
Not insane to have USC fourth in the Pac-12.
No.
Yes.
Because you got
Like, I have
Oregon,
Utah
Washington, and
and
Utah.
Where do you have the other three? Because we haven't
Well,
talked
I
about
have-
Washington. We haven't talked about Utah, who's got Cam Rising coming back now. Oregon with Bo Nix out. Like, there's some good teams in the big coming back in the Pac-12.
I have Oregon 9, Utah 10, and Washington 13, USC 14.
14 might be low, but not far off.
I mean, they kept Alex Grinch.
Are you thinking Caleb
Madison
Williams
is-
is opting out or something? Like, what? We just like because he was the reason
No, but
they
like,
were so
I
good
do
this
think-
year, and he's coming
I
back.
think they were like 3 wins lucky this year.
well,
you know,
or
like-
3 wins Caleb Williams. Like,
Well, but Caleb, some of those defensive turnovers are luck, right? You know, I don't know. I want to see more out of that defense. I want to see them take some more proven guys in the transfer portal on defense. Like, it's nice to get Anthony Lucas, but it wasn't like A&M's missing him, right? That he wasn't an impact guy. He's a potential guy. But do I trust USC to get it out of him right now? No. I'm not convinced they're going to play good defense.
I've got USC in my 5 to 10 tier right now.
I've got him in the second tier or the third tier. Yeah, 5 to 11 is where I have how many teams I have in that tier because of Caleb Williams. And that is the one thing. It's like if you have the best quarterback in the country, you can get some crap done. And
Lincoln's good. Like Lincoln Riley is a phenomenal offensive coach.
And I don't think USC is going to have a great defense next year, but I do think it will improve over what they had this year. So I look at the Pac-12. I think it's going to be kind of a meat grindery in that there are 4 legitimate teams in that conference who can win it. Oregon State could be a pain in the butt. UCLA could still be a pain in the butt to go with those 4. Like, they could play spoiler still pretty easily. So I could see USC being the 4th best team in the Pac-12. I can also see USC being in the college football playoff.
Yeah. And that's a compliment to the teams at the top of the Pac-12, the way that we're looking at them right now. Did Oregon State and make top 25?
Yeah, they're in my 5th tier.
where do you guys have Notre Dame?
I've got them in 15 to 17. What about you?
I had them at 12.
14.
Tied with Tennessee.
That,
So,
yeah, that Sam Hartman, yay.
He's going to be really interesting because he's really talented, but he also really was. I mean, that system is extremely unique, what they were doing at Wake Forest with him. And he really excelled within that system, made some really, I mean, he was phenomenal. He torched Florida State, but when they do that hold and he rides it to the last very second and then flips it out over the top, you get some pretty good wide open looks. And he had great wide receivers at Wake. I'll be curious. Like, clearly the experience, I mean, clearly it's an upgrade of what they had, and it's a position where they don't have to worry about it now. I just wonder if the upside is okay, national championship contender, or they're 10-2 as opposed to 9-3.
Yeah, see, those are my 2 biggest questions with Hartman at Notre Dame. Is that the system? Like, I don't think Sam Hartman is some sort of slow mesh system creation. Like, I still think he'll be a pretty good quarterback without it, but he has to learn the new offense, and that could be a problem. But I think the bigger thing is, like you said, there is no A.T. Perry at Notre Dame right now. Who is that guy? Who is their, like, they've lost Mayer to the draft. So you look at that receiving core, you look at that tight end core. I think there are guys who could step up. It's just there are questions at those spots where it's hard to just assume, okay, they've got that. Notre Dame's going to be really good. I've got them at 14 in the 4th tier.
So
it's happening again. Tom's going to get us a 1-star rating on Apple Podcast by that Notre Dame fan that thinks their receivers in some like alternate universe that exists are actually good. And who was the guy that you said was a big deal, and then they said it wasn't a big deal?
Avery
And
Davis.
then Stanford and UNLV and those teams played man to man with no help, and Marshall, and just like totally disrespected Notre Dame and just
Wasn't a big deal. Wasn't a big deal. They had
deal.
the best offensive line and defensive line in the country. It wasn't going to matter.
So
Start the year off right.
the 2 sides of this for Sam Hartman are, number one, I do agree that the wide receivers, especially at the top end, are better at Wake Forest, maybe the whole daggum room. But then number 2, the run game is better at Notre Dame. The offensive line is better at
Yes.
Notre Dame. It might not,
I mean,
it
a
might
lot
not
of
need
other.
to be this slow mesh, but like the way defenses have to respect the ground game at Notre Dame is different than the way that they would play the ground game at Wake Forest. So it's like there's definitely some give and take there where it might not need to be the slow mesh, but the idea that this guy is great at making reads based on the run pass option and the way a defense reacts, you can build that into a Notre Dame offense against defenses that are very concerned about what Notre Dame can do to you on the ground. So like I could see it being kind of somewhat translatable.
I mean, is it kind of, I mean, Ian Book was a good college quarterback, wasn't great. I think that's kind of like your floor of what you're hoping to get. And if he's better than that, it's just all upside. But Ian Book took him, 2 playoff games?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there you go.
Anybody? Go ahead.
No, well, I'm just saying, like, Hartman's about the best Notre Dame could have done in this transfer portal class because you know, Pratt went back to Tulane, Harris went back to UTSA. Like
Hudson Card was the other guy I think they were really interested in. They might have taken him possibly over Hartman.
No. Oh.
No?
I'll talk about
I think if they wanted him, they would have taken it. Like they waited on Hartman.
They had a chance to get him, yeah.
Have y'all seen?
I think they probably liked him.
Yeah, they liked, my understanding, they liked Card, but once they kind of, remember, I was dropping hints on here. I mean, it wasn't exactly a well-kept secret in the community about Notre Dame was waiting for a certain somebody to finish his season. Like, I feel like once they understood that was going to happen, they kind of backed off Card.
Did you all see the meme, the Patrick Bateman transfer quarterback meme? You know, the scene in American Psycho where everybody's pulling out their cards, you know, and like laying them on the table to see who's got the most impressive little business card. Except somebody like edited in all the transfer quarterbacks, and so it's Hudson Card, and then you're pulling out this one, and then the final, like the penultimate one was dropping the Sam Hartman, and Notre Dame was like, oh. The best you could do, according to the American Psycho meme, was definitely going to be is Sam Hartman coming from Wake Forest, now landing at Notre Dame. Anybody else near the back half? So we talked a little bit. We talked about the Pac-12, TCU, top tier.
Where do you guys have Clemson?
Yeah,
that's very edge of the 5 to 10, like literally listed last. You could talk me into putting them into 11 to 14, but they've got Tyler Davis coming back. I mean, they've got a decent collection of dudes coming back next year. So I've got them at the very end of the 5 to 10 tier.
13.
13?
Yeah. I want to see changes on the offensive staff. I don't like that. They just seem so stale to me. But
does Jeff Scott do it for you? Because that's not exactly like mixing things up.
Is Jeff Scott announced back to Clemson yet?
No, I was just saying, would it?
No, it would not.
Okay.
First of all, I respect Jeff Scott, like his receiver coaching quite a bit, but also I don't really classify Jeff Scott as an outside voice. That's been my main complaint is they just, you know, the Dabo of 5 or 6 years ago would have gone and got Zach Kitley, right? Like they would have got like that. Remember, he went and got Chad Morris. You know, that's the kind of like that's what got Clemson to where they were. In addition to just hitting on 2 generationally good quarterbacks, but Dabo was like, I'm going to go out and get a Brent Venables, right? To make this a guy from outside the program came in. He's a killer. Dabo was never a scheme guy, right? Nobody really wants him involved in play calling or design of the offense. He was always a recruiter, rah, hype man vibes. Okay. And then instead of going out and getting like a young hotshot OC, they're promoted from within, not bringing in new voices. Look, Clemson could easily return to the top 10. Maybe, you know, Cade is the truth at quarterback, but I do want to see some outside voices there.
Yeah. Dabo, you don't have to make any deep fakes like Georgia do. I have you in my 4th tier at number 15. Like you can win the ACC.
Right. Because the best team in the ACC might be between 10 and 15.
Do you guys have any other ACC teams ranked?
Yeah, I've got
Florida State.
Besides FSU and UNC, or besides FSU and Clemson, any other ACC teams?
I had UNC in the back end.
Same.
I got.
I mean, again, kind of like the Caleb. I mean, much different, not as high, but Drake May coming back is huge. I mean, he won a lot of games this year.
Coaching. Like, I just think they're terrible on defense, like coaching wise. But
yeah, but when you're dealing with 18 to 24, you're dealing with imperfect teams, and that what you have that is absolutely excellent on one side of the ball sometimes can overcome your weakness on the other side. I think they're happy about their portal additions. Like they feel like they've got an offense that's going to be able to go out there and put up ridiculous numbers again. They just got to outscore.
Had him 29. I mean, so that's like anywhere from like 20 to 35 is all just throw it, to me.
Yeah, I have Pitt in my 5th tier. I hear they're getting into analytics.
Hey, listen, shout out to Pitt. I was realizing today we got a new CBS, our final CBS Sports 131 is running on the site right now. If you're watching this live, it should be posted soon. But they've won 20 games in the last 2 seasons. That's more like Pat Narduzzi had not had a 9-win season prior to last year. Everything was like big 8-5 energy, all the way through. Wins 11-3 last year, 9-4 this year. Coming back in that bowl win, even with like some of your like 5 out of your 7 best players on the team not in the game. That's some impressive stuff in terms of the overall DNA. Not a huge surprise, but 20 wins in 2 years is pretty good. For North Carolina's neighborhood, by the way, I've got them in that neighborhood with like an Oregon State, a UCLA, a UTSA, teams that have like maybe one thing or one thing you like a lot, a couple of things you like a little bit, but still definitely a lot of question marks as well.
Yeah, I think if like just the ACC in general, I think if you're breaking that down into tiers, there's like you probably have to have FSU and Clemson as your top 2, and then there's like 8 teams in that 3rd tier.
Yeah, like a Pitt, a North Carolina,
NC State with Armstrong probably is still pretty. Still like Dave Doran. You may not like aesthetically, it's not always the most fun football to watch, but they do win a lot of ball games because they're well coached and their player player development's pretty damn good.
Nobody putting Louisville in any kind of tier.
I would think Louisville's in that 3rd
UNC
tier
category.
Yeah. I got a team for you. We haven't mentioned.
What's that?
Wisconsin.
Right on the edge.
5th tier.
26.
18.
Yeah. Got him at like
22.
27.
Wisconsin seems to be not messing around with the NIL stuff. Like Tom is going to be right, I think, about how Wisconsin's a better job than Nebraska. I'm going to be wrong. And I thought Nebraska was because Nebraska's NIL is on point. Wisconsin is catching up in a hurry.
The only question is
I'm going to lose this argument.
The only question is, do they lose the locker room after they get like their 7th transfer quarterback? Because they've gotten like 25% of the quarterbacks available in the portal so far this winter.
I mean that.
Anybody else we want to hit?
A couple just I want to see if you guys ranked them. Well, Pitt, we already hit. UNC. Oklahoma?
Yeah, I've got them in the 18 to 24 bucket.
Yep, 5th tier.
Same. Did you keep Tulane in with Pratt?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got Tulane 11 to 14.
Oh, no, I've got them 20.
I'm lower on that.
Whoa.
Yeah, I've got them 24.
They did beat USC.
They did, but they
Texas
lose a lot.
Tech.
They beat Kansas State.
Yeah, but they lose a lot, and it's Tulane. It's like I don't know if that's really a program that could rebuild or just reload. You know what I mean? Texas Tech.
Spears is special, but Pratt is too.
Oh yeah, Pratt's great. And
Yeah.
keeping him is huge for them, and it's going to make sure that they're a favorite in the American. I just don't know if it's going to be New Year's 6 bowl 2-loss season again. But Texas Tech is a really interesting one to me because I do feel like that is a team in the Big 12 next year that could be like the dark horse kind of team that appears in the Big 12 championship game. So that's going to be a really fun one to watch.
UCLA.
Yeah. Without it, I mean UCLA, but 18 to 24.
Mm-hmm. There's like 80 teams in my 5th tier. It's
Right.
Yeah, I mean UCLA is in the same place as an Oregon State.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to put them in the top tier of that Pac-12, but you're certainly putting them on the plus side of things in the conference.
Yeah, and if like Dante Moore turns out to be that dude, like that's a team that could suddenly kind of join the fray for a Pac-12 title contention.
And Colin Schlee's not going to be bad.
No.
Oregon State is sort of that team to me that is just the early look at they will be too high in some ratings. I mean, teams most typically stay within a certain historical range. Like we know what bad Oregon State looks like as a program. We know what good Oregon State looks like as a program. Like some people having them 9th out there in their early stuff or 12th is a little bit much.
Player. Oh man. I mean, no, we don't need to call them out. Now I'm just going to go. I've got 2 way too early top 25s pulled up right now.
Aren't you
Obviously, one of them being the Dodfather.
after all the
15.
all the criticism we've thrown like Clemson's offensive staff's way. Aren't you just a little interested to see what Jonathan Smith's going to do with DJU, though? Just like a little interested to see what's going to happen there.
Yeah,
because
It'll do better for them than it did for Clemson.
I think we're going to see a pretty good version of DJU next year, which could make Oregon State like legit again.
What if he does have a good year, and what does Clemson do then? Like maybe that's what they need to see. I'm not sold on it yet.
but
I still believe.
But
yeah,
If Iowa announced the coaching changes, okay, let me ask you this on Iowa. Are you baking in the coaching changes you expect to happen if you have them ranked, or are you waiting on them to make those changes before you rank them?
I'm going to wait on them to make those changes, but at the same time, if they do make those changes, what will the change be? Like, are you just swapping names in the same offense, or is it going to be like a change? Like, Wisconsin is changing its offense. Illinois changed its offense. Is Iowa just changing the play caller, if they even do it?
Yeah, I don't know if the change is going to happen. I mean, did you see the offensive explosion in the bowl game? They had one touchdown. They got to the end zone on offense and scored. Yeah,
they were playing with their third string QB. Okay, cut them some slack in that game.
Hey, they won. They got us to the pay window. So there we go. All right, coming up on the other side, a lot of conversation, both at the national championship game and at the coaches convention where Bud is right now, about the college football calendar. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey is suggesting that we move the early signing period, maybe get rid of it. He wants a whole look at the calendar. What do we expect from some of that, plus a few other headlines if we've got time? Next.
We got 16 dead bodies in a buried shipping container. This is a serial killing network.
To solve this case, we need all eyes on this.
Let's get to work.
This is the biggest case we've ever had. If there's something to find, my people will find it.
I have never stopped trusting my team. We're just getting started.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, where we are going to be tracking one of the conversations through the offseason is about whether we are going to see some real shifts to the recruiting, both recruiting out of high school ranks, recruiting in the transfer portal, because the coaches who originally back in 2008, AFCA released a letter that said that they would like to have this early signing period. Now, as it has been put into practice, it is running up against some of the most important time with the transfer portal window being open. It is running up against obviously any kind of postseason preparation. The quote from Greg Sankey says he hears from our coach, every single coach that I visited during the bowl season says, quote, "We are getting crushed by all of these things happening at once." But obviously let you sort of steer where this goes or what your expectation is. But how do we navigate a new calendar that would at least create some relief for these coaching staffs right now?
Sure. So I saw what Greg Sankey said, and I was excited to see what the coaches would say about that here. I talked to some coaches, off to the side about what they wanted, and then shout out to Todd Berry, by the way, who beat COVID and is doing much better, and gave us an hour yesterday recapping the head coaching meeting. He's the president of the AFCA. You used to coach at ULM, so I'm glad Todd is feeling better. And he said that kind of the prevailing thought among the coaches there was that maybe moving early signing period up was an interesting option, perhaps for the week after Thanksgiving. I think that they are kind of having to pay lip service to the high school coaches who are seeing a lot of the spots that used to go to their high school players get taken by transfer. So if you give the high school recruits an earlier bite at the apple, maybe you get more high school kids signed and a little bit less of the transfer stuff. He also mentioned they did talk about potentially pushing it back and also maybe moving it up, much earlier. Now, they're not going to decide on this. It has to go. There's the board of governors, there's oversight, there's like 6 layers of NCAA bureaucracy, right? Everybody needs a job, I guess. It's very fed.
The burger.
Yeah, right. So, I don't know what will happen with this, but I do think most coaches agree there's too much going on right now. And selfishly, as a media person, I also agree. The NFL finds a way to keep its name in the news at all times because they don't conduct their draft, free agency, and their Super Bowl on the same day, which is happening, right now in our sport. But that was an interesting discussion. I think we will probably have some sort of change. Doing it, what was it, 4 days before Christmas this year? Or
Mhm.
it was
Yeah.
really very close. That felt a little strange. I also think that we will probably see, if signing day gets moved up, I think you will also see the transfer window get moved up too. I think coaches think the actual window for transfers to take place is probably too long right now. I
When
don't
did
know.
it
Like
open? Wasn't it like the 5th or the 6th? Then it goes till January 18th. We've still
like-
got another 7 days in
Yeah.
the window.
Yeah. It was like
Correct.
the day after the title games, right? The conference title games.
And there's complications because the last day to declare for the draft is the 16th,
Mhm.
right? So, I mean, maybe you have guys surprise leave for the draft, and then all of a sudden that school needs somebody. And that's certainly possible. Like, I didn't think Ohio State center Luke Weipler was going to declare for the draft, but he did. So that may change things up there a little bit in Columbus. I talked to one guy, and he put it pretty good. He's like, I don't care about any of the changes, man. Like, we get paid a lot of money to do this. It's my job to operate within this system, Um, ultimately, like, if we want to keep all this money to ourselves, we're gonna have to deal with some inconvenience. If we
That's
want
the
to give up
Sonny
the
Dykes.
money,
Sonny Dykes does a lot of
yeah,
that when he's talking
but
about
it wasn't Sonny
changes.
Dykes because he wasn't here.
Yeah, but like he does,
yeah,
it's like that's our job. It's our job to
Right.
adapt and figure it out. But you know what else Sonny said? He said
if you put
we
them
have
on contracts,
he also said we have to protect ourselves from ourselves. He was like, we have to legislate in downtime. We have to adjust the calendar because we are so driven and so competitive that we need to leave time for us to be, good husbands, good fathers, like actually be able to have a life outside of this. And so he didn't have any specific suggestions, but he was definitely saying like, we can't have all this stuff going on at once because now 18-hour days have become 20-hour days and it's all during the holiday season.
I would push back signing period. Honestly, like, I don't have any problem with how we used to do it. Now, it was all fakery from these coaches, to be honest. Okay. Like and I love a lot of these coaches I talk to. I think they're mostly great dudes, but the reasoning given initially was BS. They had said, oh, these kids have their minds made up. They don't want to have to wait to sign. The real reason was coaches didn't want to have to babysit their
Mhm.
verbal commits over Christmas and New Year's, right? Like, that was the reason. They wanted to get these kids locked in and then enjoy their holiday. Now with transfer, they're not able to really enjoy their holiday like they would like to. So my thought is, like we used to do it. If you have your credits done, enroll early. Cool. If you don't, wait till February. You also get more clarity as a high school kid on where the coaches will be.
Mhm.
I asked Todd Barry, like, hey, if you were to have a June or July or August signing period for high school, you'd have to have provisions for coaches leaving, right? He's like, yeah, I think so. But then he said the high school coaches are really worried that the best players would opt out of their senior year of high school if they were already signed, which you do see some in high school baseball, right?
Yes.
Like, people don't pay attention to it, but like, one of my buddies is a
Pitchers
baseball
and
agent. He's
whatnot.
like,
Yep.
yes, yeah. Like, if you know after summer showcase season that you are a stud and like a first round pick in high school baseball, you're probably not throwing 140 innings.
What do y'all want to see? What would you like to
I
see?
mean, selfishly,
Yeah.
I mean, the NFL, I think that's what Sankey's looking at too, how much they own the calendar. You space things out for guys like us. And if signing day was back to February, imagine how much more content we'd have in February
Mhm.
when it gets a little dicey. Same thing, like have a transfer portal window that's smaller, tighter, gets more exposure, signing day. And don't forget about the coaches carousel, which happen. Like there's just you can own a lot more and get more exposure if you do spread it out, as opposed to, like you're saying, everything is condensed down into this tight window. And like we have days we can't even fit it all in our rundown. Like how do we talk about all this? Because there's so much going on.
Yeah, I know I've often railed against this sport trying to be too much like the NFL. This is the area where it should be trying to be like the NFL. You should be spacing this stuff out as much as possible to keep your sport like it's selfish for us in our aspect of keeping the content going and giving us stuff to talk about, but it's also good for the sport in general. Like, why are you expanding the playoff? You're chasing revenue. Another way to increase revenue, make sure people have a reason to talk about you all year long. So I think that whether you move it back and get rid of the early signing period altogether, or you just move the early signing period to a different time where it's not lost in a sea of everything else that is happening, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know what the perfect solution is, but kind of going along with Bud, what you were saying earlier about what that one coach said to you, like coaches I've talked to about this, there are typically two responses. There's the it is what it is, and there's the I hate this. Nobody loves it. Some people are just willing to deal with it.
Well, I asked Todd, I said, all right, hey man, like, and he was really gracious this time, and I appreciate it. I said, when we all get around as media, I'm sure we complain about things about our job. Like, what of this stuff do you actually think you can get done? And what of this stuff is just, hey, here's coaches complaining about the aspects of their job they don't like. And he's like, well, it's my job to make sure we get it all done. And some of the stuff he proposed, or not he, but he was just echoing what the coaches want. They want a national transparent database of what everybody's making in NIL. And I was like, do we expect to have one for coaches so I can see what Nick and Dion make from Aflac?
Aflac.
Yeah.
So, but I do think the signing period, given how much time we spent talking about it, is something that there will probably be a longer discussion about getting it moved. I don't know in which direction it will move, but I do think they want some changes made for that.
I think July, but I hadn't considered the high school coach implication of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought July because I'm talking to, some of these programs that have 12 early enrollees. They've got like 5 or 6 guys that even get to join for the bowl practices and like come be a part of the program right away. That would be that would be different, I think, if we only had the February signing period, because there would be some babysitting over the holidays. So or at least some competition, right? Like, for example, SEC program goes to get a new head coach. The new head coach has access to a big NIL war chest. There's a commit who seems like they're all set to go somewhere. They're like, yeah, coach, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. Then they
might even have their apartment leased already.
And then all of a sudden they splash in and get taken away. If that guy would have had an opportunity to sign in July, then maybe that, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But moving it a month earlier, like would you say like maybe the Wednesday after, like Wednesday of conference championship week? Would that essentially be what you were talking about? Like after Thanksgiving, right before conference championship?
Yes, that's what they're talking about.
Well, that could do that. That might be a little bit better. We'll see.
Yeah.
And then transfer portal window opens right after that. Then you would have your numbers set and you would have a different approach to the portal too.
I would also like to see transfer portal window opened up during the season. Like if if we're going to be firing coaches on Halloween, kids should be able to hit the portal on Halloween too, so they can start finding their new destination.
So that's the other thing to think, though, too. Like, if we get rid of the early signing period and just push it back to February, we might not be seeing nearly as many coaches fired before Halloween. Because that's been one of the unintended consequences of the early signing day. You're seeing programs pull the trigger a lot sooner, so that way they could try to get somebody in. And I also feel like that kind of impacts your pool of available candidates, because programs and athletic directors are feeling rushed to get a guy in before the signing day so they can keep this class intact. And maybe they're not really having enough time to interview the best possible candidates. They're just kind of taking who's available.
Very interesting. Good stuff that we will obviously be continuing to follow.
Speaking of recruiting.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Has this popped?
No, not yet. But I think the news is that it hasn't popped, right? I mean, Jaden Rashada still not enrolled, or at least not announced as enrolled at Florida. Top quarterback. Jacob Redner from our Gators 24/7 site, Swamp 247, does a tremendous job. Came over from our Arizona State site. Works with Blake Alderman there. Good morning. Here's what I've got for you right now, and hopefully there will be more known later today. I've heard there's a better chance at this moment that Rashada enrolls before the ad drop deadline than not, as Florida and the Rashada family have moved closer to a possible resolution over the last 24 hours. It doesn't mean it's solved, nor does it mean it will be solved.
He's listed in the student directory, but that does not necessarily mean he is enrolled, but rather accepted based on completing his high school academics. So, like, not being enrolled.
Yeah, the academic stuff. Here's the rest of this post. As Blake said, it sounds like this could be an issue of details rather than not having this necessary funds to pay the kid. But to reiterate, the second portion of his post, information has been a real struggle to come by, and a lot of what we're reporting on for the reasons for the hangup are murky and somewhat speculative. Again, we know this. Rashada remains unenrolled at the time of me writing this 9:50 a.m. Eastern, and the reason has absolutely nothing to do with his transcript, no matter how hard people try to indicate that it is. Recruiting is wild now. Like, this is
All right, so let's
remember what Rick George said after they hired Dion.
We'll figure out the money later.
Looks like somebody still
here and Tom.
Huh?
Bud's gone. Bud lost us. But no, you think back to what Rick George said about we'll worry about finding the money later. Maybe Florida's still worrying about some stuff.
So do you think that Jaden Rashada is on the Florida Gators football roster for 2023?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have no reason to think that, but yeah.
Okay. But do you have us? Oh no. We've lost him. Yep.
We got him back.
Okay. All right. We'll go out on this. Do you think Jaden Rashada is on the Florida Gators 2023 roster at the beginning of fall camp?
Yes.
Okay. So interesting, but we will get this resolved. At least it appears to be headed that way. But yeah, as of this morning, not enrolled at Florida. Details getting worked out.
Do we have the clip from Rounders?
Not preloaded. Hey, next time request it, and we'll have it ready.
All right.
And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.